The ocean breeze still lingered in the air when Sophie, my 34-year-old daughter-in-law, a real estate agent always hungry for luxury, looked me in the eye and said, "That beach house will be mine soon." She didn't realize that not only was it never hers, but by the next morning I, Margaret, 62, retired teacher, had already sold it, along with the one she thought belonged to her. Before we dive in, if you're listening from Miami, New York, or anywhere across the world, hit subscribe for more stories like this. Like if you'd stand your ground, comment your move, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. I'm Margaret, 62 years old, a retired high school English teacher, and for most of my life, I believed that family was my greatest treasure. I raised my only son, Daniel, mostly on my own after losing my husband early. Daniel was my pride, bright, gentle, and hard-working. He grew up to become a steady accountant, the kind of man who valued honesty and discipline. For years, every sacrifice I made, working extra tutoring hours, skipping vacations, even selling jewelry, was to give him a stable future. When Daniel married Sophie, I tried to welcome her with an open heart. She was only 34, already a successful real estate agent, sharp-tongued but charming when she wanted to be. At first, I thought she'd be the partner Daniel deserved. She spoke of ambition and comfort, and I admit, I admired her drive. But soon there were cracks. Sophie rarely showed interest in family dinners, dismissing them as boring. She rolled her eyes when Daniel insisted we keep our small traditions, like Sunday breakfasts. Still, I clung to the good moments. There were evenings when Daniel, Sophie, and I shared laughter in the beach house, watching sunsets while the smell of salt water filled the air. I thought we were building memories to last a lifetime. I even gave them access to one of my rental properties, thinking it would ease their burdens. But the warning signs were there. Sophie's fixation on possessions, her comments about what she deserved because she had married Daniel. Once I caught her casually running her fingers along the polished wood railing of my beach house and whispering, "One day, this will be mine." I laughed it off, thinking it was a joke. But nothing prepared me for the day she stopped joking. It was a humid Friday evening, the kind where the salty air clung to your skin. I had just returned to the beach house, grocery bags in hand, when I heard voices coming from the patio. Sophie's voice was sharp, cutting through the sound of waves, crashing against the shore. Curious, I stepped closer and froze. She was on the phone, pacing back and forth, her heels tapping against the wooden deck. "Yes, once Daniel's gone, everything falls into place," she said, her tone cold, calculated. "The beach house will be mine, and so will the other property. Margaret won't stand a chance. She's too old to fight me." My heart stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The grocery bag slipped from my hand, apples rolling across the floor. Sophie turned, startled, her face flushing crimson before, twisting into a smirk. "Oh, Margaret," she purred, adjusting her sleek black blazer. "Did you really think you'd hold on to these houses forever? You should be grateful. I'll make better use of them than you ever did." The air felt heavy, the scent of sea salt suddenly suffocating. My pulse hammered in my ears as I tried to steady myself. I wanted to scream, to throw her out right then and there. But something inside me shifted. The shock gave way to an icy calm. I bent down slowly, picking up a bruised apple, and met her gaze. "We'll see about that," I said quietly. She didn't know it then, but in that moment, Sophie had already lost. That's when I knew the person I trusted was gone, and my revenge had just begun. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the waves that once soothed me now felt like a drumbeat of betrayal in my chest. Sophie's words echoed in my mind. "Margaret won't stand a chance. She's too old to fight me." She thought my age made me weak. She thought being a retired teacher meant I had no weapons left. But she forgot one thing. I had raised a son like Daniel, and I had learned resilience the hard way. I started at dawn. With my coffee steaming beside me, I sat at the oak desk in the beach house study and pulled out an old leather folder. Every property deed, every mortgage paper, every financial record I had kept neatly filed away. My fingers shook at first, but as I flipped through the pages, a cold determination steadied me. Step 1. Securing assets by mid-morning. I was sitting across from Paul, my 66-year-old family lawyer and longtime friend. Paul had been with me since Daniel was a boy. His silver hair and calm voice carried the weight of experience. I slid Sophie's words across the table, repeating them with icy clarity. "She plans to take everything, Paul," I said. "I won't let her." Paul's brow furrowed as he scanned the documents. "Then we'll make sure she has no legal footing, starting today." Within hours, Paul had filed paperwork to transfer all rental property management into a trust solely under my control. Sophie's name, which I had foolishly added as an emergency contact, was erased with one swift signature. Step 2. Cutting off access next, I drove straight to the bank. The cool air inside contrasted sharply with the fire in my chest. Sitting with the manager, I froze Sophie's access to the joint account Daniel had once opened for household expenses. I replaced cards, changed PINs, and secured every cent. Sophie would wake up to find her card declined the next time she tried to buy her designer heels. But that wasn't enough. I returned to the beach house and changed the locks. The metallic click of the new bolts sliding into place was strangely satisfying. Standing at the door, I whispered, "Let her try now." Step 3. Building my strategy. Still, I knew Sophie wouldn't back down quietly. She was ambitious, prideful, and reckless. If I simply cut her off, she'd lash out louder, more dangerously. I needed to prepare not just for defense, but for a decisive strike. I called Paul again. Together, we drafted a new will, one that left Sophie nothing. Every asset, from the beach house to the downtown apartment, was locked under clauses she could never contest. We also prepared a cease and desist order, ready to deliver the moment she crossed the line. And then, the final touch. I gathered evidence. That evening, I pulled out my small digital recorder, a gift from Daniel years ago when I helped him with his work presentations. The next time Sophie threatened me, I'd have her words captured. Emotional shift by the time the sun dipped below the horizon. I was no longer the trembling widow she thought I was. The grief of Daniel's absence still weighed on me, but Sophie's cruelty had burned away the fog. For the first time since his death, I felt focused, cold, deliberate, unshakable. I stood by the window, the salty breeze brushing my face. In my hand, I held the folder of freshly signed documents, its edges sharp against my palm, a symbol of my resolve. Sophie thought she had cornered me, but I had just built the walls around her instead, and as fate would have it, she would soon step right into the trap I had set. It didn't take long for Sophie to realize something had shifted. The very next morning, my phone buzzed. 5 missed calls, then 10. By noon, there were 20. Finally, I answered, my voice calm, almost amused. "Margaret," Sophie began, her tone laced with faux sweetness, "I think there's been some mistake. My card didn't work this morning. Could you check the bank? Maybe you pressed the wrong button?" I let a pause stretch, listening to the sound of her carefully controlled breathing. "No mistake, Sophie," I replied. "I corrected one." The silence on her end was delicious, but it was only the beginning. Attempt 1, manipulation and guilt. Trip that evening, Sophie showed up at the beach house uninvited. She wore a soft beige sweater, her hair tied back. Gone was the sharp businesswoman look. She was trying to appear vulnerable. "Margaret," she said, lowering her eyes, "I know I've been distant, I know losing Daniel has been hard on both of us, but we're family. Don't you think Daniel would want us to stick together?" Her voice trembled at just the right places, but I saw through it. My hands tightened around the mug of tea I held, the steam rising like a curtain between us. "If Daniel were here," I said evenly, "he'd want honesty, Sophie, not greed." Her mask slipped for just a second, her lips pressing into a thin line. Attempt 2, fake apology, peace, talk to. Days later, she tried again, this time with roses. Red ones, perfectly arranged in a crystal vase. She left them on my porch with a handwritten note. "I'm sorry if I upset you. Let's talk over dinner." I didn't touch them. Instead, I snapped a picture, tucked it into my folder of evidence, and placed the flowers in the trash. When I called Paul, he chuckled dryly. "Classic diversion tactic," he said. "Don't bite." By then, I wasn't biting. I was sharpening my claws. Attempt 3, public confrontation, but Sophie wasn't one to quit. The real escalation came. At the community brunch the following Sunday, the seaside cafe was crowded. Neighbors, friends, familiar faces from town. I sat quietly at a corner table enjoying my coffee when Sophie stormed in like a storm cloud in heels. "There you are," she snapped, her voice carrying across the room. Heads turned instantly. "How dare you freeze me out of Daniel's accounts? How dare you lock me out of the house?" The room buzzed with whispers. I looked up slowly, meeting her blazing eyes, with cool indifference. "You locked yourself out, Sophie," I replied calmly. The words hung in the air like a verdict. People stared, some exchanging knowing looks. Sophie's face flushed crimson as she realized she had overplayed her hand in public. And then, she made her biggest mistake. She pulled out a folded document from her bag and slammed it onto the table. "Daniel wanted me to have those properties," she declared. "Here's proof." I didn't even glance at it. Paul, who had quietly entered and was standing near the doorway, stepped forward. His deep voice silenced the cafe. "That," he said firmly, "is a forged document. And Sophie knows it." The color drained from her face. The crowd's whispers grew into a low roar, and for the first time, Sophie looked cornered. Not by me, but by the truth. But she wasn't done yet, and neither was I. The showdown was coming, and it would end everything. The following week, the storm finally broke. Sophie, humiliated at the cafe, wasn't ready to surrender. She arrived at the courthouse, striding in with a sharp black suit and a high-priced lawyer at her side. Her plan was clear: intimidate me into caving before the judge. I sat calmly on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, my ally Paul by my side, his leather briefcase resting at his feet. My fingers tapped against the cool surface of a silver pen Daniel once gifted me, a symbol of quiet strength I carried with me. Around us, townspeople whispered. The news of Sophie's arrogance had spread quickly. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a spectacle. Sophie spotted me and smirked, leaning close enough for her perfume to sting my nose. "This is your last chance, Margaret," she hissed. "Sign over the properties, or I'll make sure you lose everything." I turned my head slowly, meeting her glare with steady eyes. "The only thing I'm losing today, Sophie, is patience." Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. Sophie's lawyer began dramatically, waving the so-called will she claimed Daniel had left behind. "Ladies and gentlemen, this document proves my client's rightful claim," he announced, his voice booming. But before the judge could respond, Paul rose with quiet authority. He placed a thick folder on the desk, opening it with deliberate care. "Your Honor," he began, "this isn't just a case of fraud. It's a case of greed. We have bank statements showing Sophie attempted to access accounts she had no right to. We have recordings of her openly plotting to steal property. And most importantly, he held up a small USB drive. We have her own words, recorded by Margaret herself. The courtroom gasped as Sophie's voice filled the speakers. Her cold tone echoed. Once Daniel's gone, everything falls into place. The beach house will be mine. Sophie's face drained of color. She tried to protest, standing abruptly. That's taken out of context, she cried, her voice trembling. I finally spoke, my voice steady but laced with years of quiet fury. The context is betrayal, Sophie. The context is a woman who pretended to love my son while plotting behind his back. The context is you, thinking I was too old, too weak to fight you. The judge slammed his gavel, calling for silence. Then he looked directly at Sophie. This court finds your claim invalid. Furthermore, an investigation into your fraudulent activities will proceed immediately. The room erupted. Some gasped. Others whispered with satisfaction. Sophie collapsed back into her chair, her bravado shattered. But I wasn't finished. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single envelope, placing it gently on the table in front of her. Inside are eviction notices, I said softly. For every property you thought you had a claim to. By tonight, you won't have a roof over your head. Her eyes widened in horror. The envelope trembled in her hands, a symbol of the empire she had lost in a single moment. I stood, smoothing my blazer, and looked at her one last time. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Then, with Paul at my side and the weight of the courtroom's eyes following me, I walked out. The heavy doors closed behind me with a final thud, like the end of a chapter that would never reopen. For the first time, Sophie wasn't just beaten, she was exposed. But for me, the real closure wouldn't come until months later, when I finally saw the consequences of her downfall. It had been 6 months since that day in the courthouse, and life felt different, lighter, freer, as though a weight I didn't even know I carried had finally been lifted. The salty ocean breeze no longer reminded me of betrayal, but of survival. The beach house, once shadowed by Sophie's schemes, now breathed with warmth again. I had renovated the upstairs room into a library, filling it with Daniel's books, his photographs, and little trinkets he collected on our family vacations. Every morning I'd brew coffee and sit by the window, watching the sunrise paint the waves gold. It was my ritual, my way of keeping his memory alive. Paul had become more than just a lawyer. He was a friend. He often visited with his wife, bringing homemade pies and laughter to my kitchen. Together, we would reminisce about Daniel, and sometimes he'd shake his head in disbelief. She really thought she could outsmart you, Margaret, but you were always 10 steps ahead. His words made me smile, not out of pride, but out of relief that I had defended my son's legacy with the strength he would have expected from me. As for Sophie, her life unraveled quickly. The forged documents, the fraudulent bank attempts, and the recordings I had presented in court became the foundation of a criminal case. She lost her real estate license, her reputation crumbled, and the community that once admired her sophistication now whispered her name with disdain. She was forced to sell her condo to cover legal fees, and the woman who once boasted about owning everything was left renting a small apartment on the outskirts of town. But perhaps the deepest cut for her wasn't financial. It was social. Invitations stopped coming. Clients disappeared. The same cafe where she once tried to humiliate me now refused to serve her. In the end, her downfall wasn't just about losing money. It was about losing face, permanently. Meanwhile, my circle of support grew stronger. Neighbors who had watched the drama unfold began stopping by more often, bringing flowers or homemade bread, simply to say, "We're proud of how you stood your ground." Their kindness reminded me that dignity isn't measured by what people take from you. It's measured by what you refuse to let go of, your integrity. One quiet evening, as I closed the shutters against the cool breeze, I paused in front of Daniel's picture on the mantel. He was smiling, forever young, his arms slung around me. For a long moment, I simply stood there, letting tears well up. But they weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of peace. I whispered softly, "We did it, Daniel. We kept your memory safe. She can't touch us anymore." Then, I blew out the candle by his frame, watching the smoke curl upward like a vow carried into the night sky. Cinematic visual plus final vow. The next morning, I locked the front door of the beach house and walked barefoot into the sand. The sun rose behind me, casting a long shadow that stretched across the waves. With every step, I felt the world reminding me, endings aren't just about loss. They're about new beginnings. I wasn't just Margaret, the grieving mother, anymore. I was Margaret, the survivor, the protector, the woman who refused to be erased. When you stop paying for love, you find out who truly loves you. And when you finally stand your ground, no one can ever take it from you again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it. And in the comments, tell me what topic you'd like the next story on. Plus, rate this one out of 10.